My name is Jake Morrison, and for 3 years, I thought I had found my dream job at Riverside Transit Authority. At 28, I was the youngest station supervisor in the company's history, managing the bustling Central Station downtown. The pay was solid, the benefits were excellent, and I genuinely loved helping the thousands of commuters who passed through our doors every day. Central Station wasn't just a transit hub, it was the heartbeat of our city. Business executives rushed to catch the 7:15 express, college students fumbled with their monthly passes, and elderly folks relied on our clear announcements and helpful staff to navigate the system. I took pride in keeping everything running smoothly, from ensuring the platforms were clean to making sure our electronic boards displayed accurate arrival times. My team consisted of 8 dedicated employees. Maria Rodriguez handled ticketing with a smile that could brighten anyone's morning commute. Tom Bradley managed security with the perfect balance of authority and kindness. And Rebecca Walsh coordinated the cleaning crew with military precision. We worked like a well-oiled machine, and customer satisfaction scores for Central Station had reached an all-time high under my supervision. Everything changed when Regional Manager Richard Blackwood got promoted to District Operations Director. Blackwood was a company lifer. 45 years old, grey-haired, and seemingly carved from stone. He'd climbed the corporate ladder methodically, accumulating titles and power along the way. Where my previous regional manager, Linda Thompson, had been collaborative and supportive, Blackwood ruled through intimidation and micromanagement. The first red flag appeared during his introductory visit to Central Station. Instead of meeting with the team or observing our operations, Blackwood spent 2 hours in my office, poring over spreadsheets and questioning every decision I'd made in the past 6 months. "Morrison," he said, not looking up from his tablet, "your overtime expenses are 15% above the district average." I explained that Central Station handled 30% more passenger traffic than any other location, making additional staffing necessary during peak hours. Our customer service ratings proved the investment was worthwhile. "Numbers don't lie," Blackwood replied curtly. "Efficiency means doing more with less. I expect to see those overtime costs reduced by 25% within 60 days. He stood up, straightening his tie with the precision of a military officer. "Another thing, I've noticed your staff seems comfortable. Too comfortable. In my experience, comfortable employees become complacent employees. We'll be implementing some changes to tighten things up around here." I watched him survey the station floor through my office window, his cold eyes cataloging everything like a predator studying prey. Aria was helping an elderly woman understand the new digital payment system, taking extra time to ensure she felt confident using it. Tom was chatting with a group of teenagers, building the kind of community rapport that prevented problems before they started. "Your people spend too much time socializing," Blackwood observed. "This is a transit station, not a social club. Sir, building relationships with our regular passengers is part of what makes this station successful. When people feel welcome and supported, they're more likely to." Morrison. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "I didn't ask for your opinion. I'm telling you how things are going to be." That afternoon, after Blackwood left, I called a team meeting. My employees gathered in the break room, their faces reflecting the same unease I felt. They'd all noticed the new district director's demeanor during his walkthrough. "What's the word, Jake?" Tom asked, settling his large frame into one of the plastic chairs. That guy seemed about as warm as a freezer burn. I tried to maintain optimism while explaining Blackwood's expectations. The overtime cuts would mean reduced staffing during rush hours, and his emphasis on efficiency over comfort suggested more changes were coming. "We'll figure it out," I assured them. "We always do." But even as I spoke those words, I felt a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. Something about Richard Blackwood's demeanor suggested this was just the beginning. The changes started small, like drops of poison in a well. 2 weeks after Blackwood's visit, I received an email marked urgent, "New policies effective immediately." The message contained a list of 17 new rules, each more restrictive than the last. Employees were no longer allowed to engage in non-essential conversations with passengers. All break times were reduced by 5 minutes. Personal cell phones had to be stored in lockers during shifts. No exceptions. The most devastating change involved our community outreach program. For 2 years, we'd hosted Senior Saturdays, where elderly passengers could receive extra assistance navigating the transit system. Rebecca had organized monthly safety presentations, and Maria had created large print schedule cards for passengers with vision difficulties. The program had earned recognition from the mayor's office and generated significant positive media coverage. Blackwood's email was blunt. All non-essential programs are hereby discontinued. Station staff will focus exclusively on basic operational duties. I immediately called Blackwood's office, hoping to discuss the changes before implementing them. Director Blackwood's office, Jennifer speaking. Hi Jennifer, this is Jake Morrison from Central Station. I need to speak with Director Blackwood about the new policies he sent over. One moment please. After a brief hold, Jennifer returned. Director Blackwood says if you have concerns about policy implementation, you should submit them in writing through proper channels. Proper channels. I'm trying to discuss how these changes will affect our operations and… I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison, but Director Blackwood is in meetings all day. You'll need to submit a formal request. The line went dead. I spent the next hour crafting a carefully worded email explaining how the new policies would impact customer service and staff morale. I included specific examples of how our current practices had improved passenger satisfaction and suggested alternative approaches that could maintain efficiency while preserving our community connections. Blackwood's response arrived 30 minutes later. Morrison. Policies are not suggestions. Implement immediately or face disciplinary action. Blackwood that afternoon, I gathered my team to explain the changes. The mood in the break room was somber as I read through each new restriction. So we can't help passengers anymore? Maria asked, her voice tight with frustration. Yesterday, I spent 10 minutes helping Mrs. Patterson figure out which bus would get her to her dialysis appointment. Now that's against the rules. We can still provide basic assistance, I said, though the words felt hollow. We just need to be more focused. Tom shook his head. Jake, this is crazy. Half the people who come through here are tourists or occasional riders. They need help navigating the system. Are we supposed to just ignore them? Rebecca raised her hand tentatively. What about Senior Saturdays? We have 43 people registered for next week's session. I had dreaded this question. The program is cancelled. I'm supposed to contact everyone and tell them we're no longer offering community services. The silence that followed was deafening. These weren't just policies to my team. They were personal attacks on everything we'd built together. The next morning, I arrived early to find Blackwood standing on the main platform with a clipboard, timing how long it took Maria to process each ticket transaction. He wasn't hiding his presence. He wanted everyone to know they were being watched. Morrison, he called out as I approached. Your ticketing agent is averaging 47 seconds per transaction. Industry standard is 35 seconds. Maria provides personalized service that… I don't care about personalized service. I care about efficiency. Tell her to speed up, or I'll find someone who can. As Blackwood walked away, Maria caught my eye from behind the ticket counter. Her usual smile was gone, replaced by a look of barely contained anger. For the first time in 3 years, I saw defeat in the eyes of my best employee. That's when I realized Blackwood wasn't just changing policies. He was systematically destroying everything that made Central Station special. The harassment escalated daily. Blackwood began making unannounced visits, appearing at random times with his clipboard and stopwatch. He would position himself where my staff could see him, creating an atmosphere of constant surveillance that made everyone nervous and defensive. During his third surprise inspection, he approached Tom while he was helping a lost family find their connecting platform. Security personnel should not be providing directional assistance, Blackwood announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. That's what the information boards are for. Tom's face reddened, but he maintained his professionalism. Sir, this family doesn't speak English well, and their connecting train leaves in 8 minutes. I didn't ask for explanations. Return to your assigned post immediately. The family watched in confusion as Tom was forced to abandon them mid-conversation. I quickly stepped in to help them myself, but the damage was done. Passengers began looking at our staff with uncertainty, unsure whether asking for help would get someone in trouble. The breaking point came when Blackwood targeted Rebecca's cleaning crew. He implemented a new efficiency schedule that cut cleaning time by 40% while adding additional tasks. When Rebecca protested that the timeline was impossible, Blackwood scheduled a formal meeting. I attended as Rebecca's supervisor, expecting a constructive discussion about realistic expectations. Instead, Blackwood spent 30 minutes berating Rebecca for making excuses and lacking commitment to excellence. Perhaps you're not the right fit for this position, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. There are plenty of people who would appreciate the opportunity to work for Riverside Transit. Rebecca left the meeting in tears. She'd worked for the company for 12 years and had never received anything but positive evaluations. Now she was being treated like a problem employee for advocating for basic workplace standards. That evening, I called my mentor, Linda Thompson, who had retired 6 months earlier. Linda had been instrumental in my career development, and I desperately needed advice. Jake, I am so sorry, Linda said after I explained the situation. I heard rumors about Blackwood's management style, but I hope they were exaggerated. What am I supposed to do, Linda? My entire team is miserable. Passenger complaints are starting to come in. We went from being the highest-rated station in the district to feeling like a prison. Linda was quiet for a moment. Have you documented everything? What do you mean? Every interaction, every unreasonable demand, every policy change that impacts operations. If this continues, you'll need evidence that Blackwood's methods are harming both employee welfare and customer service. I started keeping detailed records that night. Every conversation, every email, every incident where Blackwood's policies created problems for passengers or staff. I photographed the overtime sheets showing dangerously understaffed shifts. I saved customer complaint forms that specifically mentioned feeling unwelcome or ignored by station personnel. Meanwhile, Blackwood's campaign of intimidation intensified. He began scheduling mandatory performance reviews, where he would nitpick minor infractions and issue written warnings for previously acceptable behavior. Maria received a formal reprimand for exceeding appropriate interaction time after she helped an elderly passenger call his daughter to confirm his pickup location. The situation reached a new low when Blackwood eliminated our employee appreciation program. For years, we had recognized outstanding service with small rewards. Gift cards, preferred parking spots, or extra break time. These gestures cost the company almost nothing but meant everything to staff morale. Participation trophies create entitlement, Blackwood explained during his announcement. Employees should take pride in doing their jobs correctly, not expect rewards for basic competence. Tom submitted his resignation that afternoon. He'd been offered a security position with better pay at a private company, and Blackwood's treatment had made the decision easy. I'm sorry, Jake, Tom said as he cleaned out his locker. I know this leaves you short-staffed, but I can't work in this environment anymore. It's affecting my mental health. Losing Tom was devastating, both personally and operationally. He had been the heart of our security team and a mentor to new employees. His departure sent a clear message to the rest of the staff. Even dedicated long-term employees weren't safe from Blackwood's toxic management style. As I watched Tom walk away, I realized that doing nothing was no longer an option. Everything fell apart on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. We were already operating with skeleton staff due to Blackwood's overtime restrictions when the 7:30 express broke down on the main line, stranding 400 passengers in the tunnel. Emergency protocols required us to manage evacuation procedures, coordinate replacement transportation, and handle the influx of frustrated commuters seeking alternatives. With Tom gone and our staff stretched impossibly thin, I made the decision any reasonable supervisor would make. I called in our part-time employees and authorized emergency overtime to handle the crisis. For 3 hours, my team performed magnificently. Maria processed refunds and helped passengers arrange alternative transportation while fielding angry calls from people late for work. Rebecca coordinated with maintenance crews and kept the station clean despite twice the normal foot traffic. Even our newest employee, David Martinez, stepped up to direct passenger flow and prevent dangerous overcrowding. By 11 a.m., we had managed the crisis without a single safety incident or major complaint. Passengers were grateful for our staff's professionalism under pressure, and several took time to compliment our handling of the situation. Then Blackwood arrived. I was in my office completing the incident report when he stormed through the door without knocking. His face was red with anger, and he carried a printed copy of the overtime authorization I'd submitted. "What is this?" he demanded, slamming the paper on my desk. "Emergency overtime authorization for the train breakdown this morning. We had 400 stranded passengers and I don't care if we had 4,000 stranded passengers. You do not have authority to exceed overtime budgets without my explicit approval." I stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, we had an emergency situation. I followed standard protocols for unexpected incidents." "Standard protocols are what I say they are." Blackwood leaned across my desk, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You've been a problem since day one, Morrison. Always questioning, always making excuses, always thinking you know better than your superiors. I'm trying to run this station effectively and safely. The decisions I made this morning prevented what could have been a dangerous situation." Blackwood straightened up, his expression cold and calculating. "Effective management means following orders, not freelancing solutions. You've demonstrated repeatedly that you can't be trusted to operate within established parameters." He pulled out his phone and made a call without taking his eyes off me. "Jennifer, prepare a disciplinary action report for Jake Morrison. Insubordination and unauthorized budget expenditures." He paused, listening to something on the other end. "No, make it a final written warning. And draft a letter of reprimand for his personnel file." My heart pounded as the implications sank in. A final written warning meant any future infractions would result in immediate termination. In Blackwood's world, infractions could include anything from helping passengers too extensively to authorizing necessary overtime during emergencies. After hanging up, Blackwood delivered his final blow. "Effective immediately, you're suspended pending investigation of this morning's incidents. Security will escort you from the premises while we review your fitness for continued employment." "You're suspending me for managing an emergency. I'm suspending you for gross insubordination and financial misconduct. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." 20 minutes later, I found myself standing in the parking lot, watching through the glass doors as my team struggled to manage the afternoon rush without their supervisor. Maria kept glancing toward my empty office, clearly distressed. Rebecca looked overwhelmed as she tried to coordinate tasks that normally required supervisory approval. The security guard who had escorted me out was apologetic but firm. "Sorry, Jake. Orders are orders." As I drove home, my phone buzzed with text messages from my team. "This is insane. What can we do? Maria, the whole station is falling apart without you. Rebecca, I'm looking for other jobs. This place is toxic." David, that evening, sitting in my apartment with a beer and a pile of documentation I'd been keeping, I realized Blackwood had made a critical mistake. He had pushed too far too fast in front of too many witnesses. For the first time in months, I smiled. It was time to fight back. The suspension gave me something I hadn't had in months: Time to think strategically. I spent the first day organizing my documentation. 3 months of detailed records painted a clear picture of Blackwood's systematic harassment and the deteriorating conditions at Central Station. I had photographs of understaffed shifts, copies of unreasonable policy changes, and testimonies from passengers complaining about reduced service quality. But I needed more than just my perspective. I needed proof that Blackwood's methods were damaging the entire transit system. I started with Linda Thompson. As a retired regional manager with 30 years of experience, she understood both the company culture and the political landscape at Riverside Transit. "Jake, what you're describing isn't just bad management," Linda said as she reviewed my documentation over coffee. "Some of these policies violate basic safety protocols. The staffing cuts during emergency situations could create liability issues. Do you think anyone higher up the chain would care?" Linda nodded thoughtfully. District Director Patricia Hayes has always prioritized passenger safety and employee welfare. She and Blackwood have clashed before over his aggressive cost-cutting measures. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. "I still have friends in HR who might be willing to share information about employee complaints from other stations under Blackwood's supervision." While Linda worked her network, I reached out to my team. Despite the risk of retaliation, they were eager to share their experiences and document the impact of Blackwood's policies. Maria provided detailed accounts of passenger complaints, including several where elderly or disabled passengers had been discouraged from seeking assistance. "Mrs. Henderson called me yesterday," Maria reported. "She said she doesn't feel safe using the station anymore because no one is allowed to help her." Rebecca documented the safety concerns created by rushed cleaning schedules. "We're supposed to mop the platform areas in 8 minutes instead of 20. Yesterday, a passenger slipped because the floor wasn't properly dried. If someone gets seriously injured, the company will be liable." David, our newest employee, provided the most damaging testimony. "During my training, I was taught that passenger assistance was a core responsibility. Now I get written up for doing exactly what the training manual says I should do." The breakthrough came when Linda's HR contact, Margaret Foster, agreed to meet with us confidentially. Margaret had been with Riverside Transit for 15 years and had witnessed multiple management transitions. "Blackwood has generated more employee complaints in 8 months than most managers accumulate in their entire careers," Margaret revealed. "We've had 11 formal grievances filed against him, 7 requests for transfers out of his district, and 3 discrimination complaints." She handed me a folder of documents. "These are redacted copies of complaints from other stations. I can't give you names, but the patterns are identical to what you've described." The paperwork was damning. Station supervisors across Blackwood's district reported identical issues: impossible performance standards, punitive policies that discouraged customer service, and a climate of intimidation that had resulted in increased turnover and declining passenger satisfaction scores. "Why hasn't anyone stopped him?" I asked. Margaret sighed. "He delivers short-term cost savings. Corporate executives see reduced overtime expenses and lower operational costs. They don't see the long-term damage to employee morale and customer relationships." What would it take to get District Director Hayes to intervene? Concrete evidence that his methods are harming operations and creating legal liability. Customer complaints, safety incidents, documentation of policy violations. You'd need a comprehensive case that she couldn't ignore. That night, I began assembling what I privately called the Blackwood file. Every policy violation, every safety concern, every instance where his cost-cutting measures had created problems for passengers or employees. I cross-referenced customer complaint logs with staffing records to show the correlation between reduced service and declining satisfaction scores. I also started reaching out to passengers who had been affected by the policy changes. Many were eager to share their experiences and frustrations with the reduced level of service at Central Station. By the end of the week, I had built a comprehensive case demonstrating that Blackwood's management style wasn't just toxic, it was actively damaging the transit system's reputation and creating serious safety and legal risks. The question now was how to present this information in a way that would force immediate action. I decided to start with the nuclear option, a formal complaint to District Director Patricia Hayes. Working with Linda and Margaret, I crafted a 20-page report documenting systematic management failures under Blackwood's supervision. The complaint included specific examples of policy violations, safety concerns, and discriminatory practices, supported by witness statements and photographic evidence. The key was framing the issue in terms that corporate leadership would understand: liability, financial risk, and reputation damage. Director Hayes needs to see this as a business problem, not just a personal issue. Linda advised as we finalized the document. Show her how Blackwood's methods are costing the company money and creating legal exposure. I submitted the complaint on a Monday morning, requesting an urgent meeting to discuss critical operational and safety concerns at Central Station. Hayes' assistant scheduled the meeting for Thursday afternoon. Meanwhile, I launched a parallel campaign to document ongoing problems during my suspension. My team continued providing updates on staffing shortages, customer complaints, and safety incidents that occurred while I was banned from the premises. The situation at Central Station was deteriorating rapidly. Without proper supervision, my replacement, a junior administrator with no operational experience, was struggling to maintain basic services. Passenger complaints had tripled in just 1 week. On Wednesday, the crisis I had been predicting finally materialized. Rebecca called me at 2 p.m., her voice shaking with anxiety. "Jake, we have a problem. The afternoon cleaning crew called in sick, and there's no supervisor here to authorize overtime for replacement staff. The evening rush is going to hit a station that hasn't been properly cleaned since yesterday. Where's the temporary supervisor? He left for a meeting an hour ago and won't be back until tomorrow." I tried calling Blackwood's office, but they said all overtime requests required 24-hour advance notice. I could hear the frustration and fear in Rebecca's voice. A poorly maintained station during rush hour wasn't just unprofessional. It was dangerous. Spilled coffee, wet floors, and accumulated debris could cause serious injuries when combined with crowds of hurrying passengers. "Document everything," I told her. "Take pictures of the conditions, note the time you attempted to get authorization, and keep records of any passenger complaints or safety incidents." At 6 p.m., Rebecca sent me photos that made my stomach drop. The main platform was covered in trash and spilled beverages. Wet spots from the morning's rain had never been properly cleaned, creating slip hazards throughout the concourse. The restrooms were in deplorable condition. Then came the call I had been dreading. Jake, an elderly woman, slipped near the ticket counter. Maria reported, her voice tight with stress. "She's okay, but she's talking about calling a lawyer." There was a wet spot that should have been cleaned hours ago. I immediately called Margaret Foster in HR to report the incident. "This is exactly what we've been warning about," I told her. "Blackwood's staffing cuts have created dangerous conditions." "I'll document the incident," Margaret promised. This kind of safety issue gets immediate attention from the executive level. The next morning brought vindication in the form of an emergency email from District Director Hayes to all station personnel. Effective immediately, all stations will maintain adequate cleaning staff during operational hours. Safety protocols take precedence over budget considerations. Any supervisor who fails to maintain safe conditions will face immediate disciplinary action. The email was clearly a response to the previous day's incident. More importantly, it represented the first public rebuke of Blackwood's cost-cutting policies. Thursday's meeting with Director Hayes was scheduled for 2 p.m. I arrived 15 minutes early, carrying 3 copies of my comprehensive report and a folder of supporting documentation. Hayes' secretary, a professional woman in her 50s, reviewed my paperwork with obvious concern. Director Hayes has been reviewing preliminary information about your situation, she told me quietly. I think you'll find her very receptive to your concerns. As I sat in the waiting area, watching transit executives hurry past with their briefcases and worried expressions, I realized this meeting would determine not just my future, but the future of everyone working under Blackwood's oppressive management style. The fight was about to begin in earnest. District Director Patricia Hayes was nothing like I had expected. In her early 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, she exuded the kind of quiet authority that came from decades of experience managing complex operations. Mr. Morrison, please sit down, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. I've reviewed your complaint and I have some questions. The next hour was the most intense professional conversation of my life. Hayes methodically went through each allegation in my report, asking for specific details and corroborating evidence. She had clearly done her homework. Several times she referenced incidents and policy changes that I had documented, indicating she had been investigating independently. The slip and fall incident yesterday was the third safety issue at Central Station this month. She observed, reviewing a file on her desk. That's more than the rest of the district combined. Ma'am, the staffing cuts have made it impossible to maintain safe conditions during peak hours. My team has been raising these concerns for weeks. Hayes nodded grimly. I'm aware. I've also received complaints from passengers about the elimination of assistance programs for elderly and disabled riders. These services weren't just nice gestures. They're ADA compliance requirements. My heart raced as the implications sank in. Blackwood's policies weren't just cruel. They were potentially illegal. Director Hayes, I need you to know that my team has been afraid to report these issues through normal channels. Anyone who questions Director Blackwood's policies faces retaliation, such as suspending a station supervisor for managing an emergency. Exactly. Hayes closed my file and leaned back in her chair. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to be direct with you. Director Blackwood's management methods have generated more complaints and safety concerns than any supervisor in our district's history. However, he has also delivered significant cost savings that have impressed certain members of our executive team. My heart sank. Was this going to be another case of corporate leadership prioritizing short-term profits over employee welfare and public safety? Hayes continued, which is why I need your help to document that these cost savings are actually costing us money in the long run. She pulled out a thick folder labeled Central Station, Operational Analysis. Customer satisfaction scores at Central Station have dropped 23% since Director Blackwood assumed oversight. Passenger complaints have increased 156%. We've had 3 safety incidents, 2 near-miss accidents, and 1 potential ADA violation, all in the past month. I stared at the data, amazed that someone at the executive level had been paying attention to the human costs of Blackwood's efficiency measures. More importantly, Hayes continued, we've calculated that the liability exposure from these safety issues and policy violations far exceeds the operational savings from reduced staffing. She handed me another document. This is a formal investigation order. As of this afternoon, Director Blackwood is suspended pending a comprehensive review of his management practices. You are reinstated as station supervisor at Central Station, effective immediately. I felt a wave of relief and vindication wash over me. What about retaliation? Blackwood still has allies in the corporate structure. Mr. Morrison, Director Blackwood's allies are primarily concerned with quarterly budget numbers. When they see the liability calculations and potential lawsuit costs associated with his methods, their enthusiasm will fade quickly. Hayes stood up and extended her hand. I want you to know that your willingness to document these issues and fight for proper working conditions took considerable courage. Not everyone would have been willing to risk their career to protect their team and passengers. As I shook her hand, Hayes added something that made the entire struggle worthwhile. We're implementing new oversight procedures to prevent this kind of management abuse from happening again. No supervisor should have the unchecked authority to create unsafe working conditions or eliminate services that passengers depend on. Walking out of that office, I felt a sense of justice and validation that I hadn't experienced in months. The fight wasn't over. There would be paperwork, investigations, and probably some awkward conversations with corporate executives who had initially supported Blackwood's methods. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I knew that the good guys were going to win. The aftermath was more satisfying than I could have imagined. Within 48 hours of my reinstatement, news of Blackwood's suspension had spread throughout the entire transit system. My phone buzzed constantly with congratulatory messages from colleagues across the district who had been suffering under similar oppressive management styles. Returning to Central Station felt like coming home. My team welcomed me back with obvious relief and excitement. Maria actually started crying when she saw me walk through the door. "Thank God," she said, wiping her eyes. "Yesterday, the temporary supervisor told Mrs. Patterson she wasn't allowed to ask questions about schedule changes because it was slowing down operations. Those days are over," I assured her. "We're going back to doing things the right way." The changes were immediate and dramatic. I reinstated our community assistance programs, restored reasonable staffing levels during peak hours, and eliminated the punitive policies that had made everyone's job miserable. Within a week, Central Station felt like itself again. The investigation into Blackwood's management practices revealed even more troubling information than I had documented. I discovered that he had been falsifying safety reports, underreporting passenger complaints, and systematically intimidating employees who questioned his policies. More damaging still, they found evidence that Blackwood had been aware of ADA compliance violations, but had chosen to ignore them because fixing the problems would have increased operational costs. His methods weren't just unethical. Margaret Foster told me during a follow-up meeting. They were creating massive legal liability for the entire company. The corporate executives who had initially supported Blackwood's cost-cutting measures quickly distanced themselves when they realized the potential lawsuit exposure. The same people who had praised his innovative efficiency methods were now condemning his reckless disregard for safety protocols. 3 weeks after his suspension, Blackwood was terminated for cause. The official reason cited gross misconduct and violation of company safety policies. But everyone in the system knew he had been fired for being a bully who prioritized budget numbers over human decency. The best part was what happened next. District Director Hayes asked me to help develop new management training protocols focused on employee welfare and passenger service quality. "We need to make sure future supervisors understand that true efficiency comes from supporting employees, not intimidating them," she explained. I was also promoted to Senior Station Supervisor with oversight responsibilities for 3 additional locations. The raise was substantial, but more importantly, the position gave me the authority to prevent other employees from experiencing what my team had endured. 6 months later, I received a letter from the mayor's office commending Central Station for having the highest customer satisfaction scores in the city. We had not only recovered from Blackwood's damage, but had exceeded our previous performance levels. The letter mentioned specific praise for our community assistance programs and the professionalism of our staff during emergency situations. Tom Bradley even came back to work for us. When I called to tell him about Blackwood's termination and the changes we had implemented, he immediately submitted an application to return to his security position. "I miss working with good people," he told me on his first day back. "Life's too short to spend it in toxic environments." The sweetest moment came during our first employee appreciation ceremony since Blackwood's departure. As I presented service awards to Maria, Rebecca, and the rest of the team, I realized we had accomplished something more important than just getting rid of a bad manager. We had proven that ordinary employees could fight back against workplace abuse and win. We had shown that companies would ultimately choose to do the right thing when the consequences of doing wrong became too expensive to ignore. Most importantly, we had created a workplace where people felt valued, supported, and empowered to provide excellent service to the community. Standing in that break room, surrounded by my colleagues and friends, I understood that sometimes the best revenge against workplace bullies isn't getting them fired. It's building something better in the space they tried to destroy. Blackwood had tried to turn Central Station into a machine focused only on profit margins and efficiency metrics. Instead, we had turned it back into what it was always meant to be: a place where real people help other real people get where they need to go. And that felt like justice. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.